For an entire year, I built the image of an old woman who survived by collecting recyclables. I did it for one reason. I was waiting for this day. That morning, I happened to appear in the path of a popular streamer filming one of his street challenges. Ma'am, I'd like to give you 100 yuan. Take it and buy anything you want. I accepted the bill from the young man and gave him a faint smile of relief, as though a weight I had carried for a very long time had finally been lifted from my shoulders. He had no idea that this single banknote would allow me to complete my plan for revenge in front of hundreds of thousands of witnesses. I had just dropped several plastic bottles from a trash bin into my woven sack when I heard his voice behind me again. Ma'am, this is for you. 100 yuan. A fashionably dressed young man was pointing his phone camera at me. He tried to hide the contempt in his eyes, but I saw it clearly. When I pretended not to understand, he pulled out a red banknote and pressed it into my hand. Go ahead and take it. You can buy whatever you like. I tightened my fingers around the money and narrowed my eyes at the phone screen. At last we were live. The comments poured in. I can't go a day without watching Super Hugh. Hugh actually does something to help people in need. That poor old woman. Her clothes are so worn and dirty. I hope 100 yuan can make her life a little easier. The audience grew by the second. Within minutes, more than 100,000 people were watching. I slipped the money into my pocket and nodded to the streamer known online as Super Hugh. That was enough witnesses. Super Hugh followed behind me, filming while talking endlessly to his audience. My friends, Super Hugh's 100 yuan street challenge has been running for a full year. None of this would be possible without your support. Don't worry. Every person I choose is genuinely struggling. 100 yuan may not sound like much, but it can still help someone meet a real need. You can call me cheap if you want, but my conscience is clear. His voice was filled with practiced emotion. Before long, animated gifts covered the screen. He glanced at me and continued. This woman must be over 60. At her age, she should be resting, but instead she still has to collect recyclables to survive. Life has not been easy for her. Let's see what practical things she can buy with 100 yuan. He quickened his pace until he was walking beside me. Ma'am, where is your family? Why would they let someone your age walk the streets collecting scrap? I answered calmly. I don't have anyone left. Super Hugh sighed and arranged his face into an expression of sympathy. You really have had a difficult life. If you ever need help, just tell me. Super Hugh will never turn you away. I turned and studied him in silence. My stare made him uncomfortable. Is something wrong, ma'am? I smiled softly. Number? You're already helping me. Still talking, I led him toward a fruit stall beneath the old riverside building. There were no customers. The owner, Teresa Cole, was about my age. She looked me up and down with open impatience. What do you want? I pointed to a bundle of sugarcane leaning beside the stall. She examined my torn clothes and spoke sharply. 30 yuan a stalk. Do you even have money? I held up the 100 yuan note. Only then did she reluctantly pull out a stalk and begin peeling it. The live stream comments immediately became more active. That poor woman. She finally has money and just wants to taste something sweet. 30 yuan. That's expensive. Sugarcane usually costs 20. The owner deliberately chose the oldest stalk. Strammer, warn her. Super Hugh looked at the screen and lowered his voice. My friends, my rule is simple. I give people the money, but I don't interfere with how they spend it, so I won't say anything. I examined the peeled sugarcane. It was dry and several patches inside had already darkened. Teresa carried it to a cutter, chopped it into pieces and placed them in a plastic bag. As she reached out to give me the bag, I shook my head and raised 2 fingers. 2 more. Her face immediately brightened. She quickly selected 2 stalks that looked even worse than the first. The comments kept coming. Is this old woman confused? That sugarcane is spoiled and she can't even tell. Why is she buying so much? She can't eat all of it. Anyone else would buy food or medicine. She's wasting everything on sugarcane. Super Hugh stared at his phone, unable to hide the smile at the corner of his mouth. Arguments created engagement. Engagement created popularity. Within a short time, tens of thousands of new viewers joined the broadcast. Teresa quickly finished cutting the other 2 stalks. I stood in front of her and watched in silence. As she gathered the 3 bags to hand them over, a powerful gust of wind swept through the market. Dust and plastic bags spun through the air. Teresa instinctively raised a hand to protect her eyes. Then a heavy sound came from above. A brick fell from the old building. Teresa collapsed beside the stall. The people nearby froze for several seconds before screams erupted around us. Super Hugh's eyes widened. Both hands tightened around his phone, but the camera remained pointed at the scene. Comments flooded the screen. Was someone really hurt? Is this real or staged? We just witnessed an accident live. A neighboring vendor called emergency services and the police. The ambulance and patrol cars arrived soon afterward. The paramedics examined Teresa, then quietly shook their heads. There was nothing they could do. The police secured the scene, moved the crowd back, and took her away. Once the initial chaos settled, Super Hugh could barely conceal his excitement. The number of comments surged. His live stream climbed to the top of the platform rankings. He turned the camera toward himself and forced grief into his expression. My friends, we have just witnessed a terrible accident. A human life ended before our eyes. We never know what will arrive first, tomorrow or tragedy. However, our promise to this woman is not yet complete. The broadcast will continue. He smiled at me. The disgust I had seen in his eyes earlier was gone. Now I was useful to him. I had become a tool for attracting attention. I continued through Riverside Market with him following close behind. One comment caught my eye. I feel like the fruit vendor died because of this old woman. If she had bought only one stock, Teresa would have moved away from the cutter sooner and wouldn't have been standing beneath the brick. The account was immediately attacked. Teresa was a dishonest vendor. She knowingly sold spoiled food to an old woman. Bad people eventually face consequences. Who knows how many customers she cheated before today? I watched the words scroll past and laughed coldly inside. These people hid behind screens, placed themselves on a moral pedestal, and condemned anyone whose opinion differed from their own. But were they really any better than the fruit vendor? I stopped in front of a budget menswear shop. I selected a red necktie priced at 10 yuan. I pulled it between both hands to test the fabric, then nodded with satisfaction. After paying, I handed it to Super Hugh. Take it. This is a gift for you. He looked at the cheap tie with an awkward expression. The viewers were moved again. She's so kind. Ivy watched this challenge for months, and this is the first time someone used the money to buy Hugh a gift. In her generation, a man in a suit and tie represents success. Hugh, accept it. She means well. More virtual gifts filled the screen. Super Hugh smiled broadly. Thank you, ma'am. According to my rules, I shouldn't accept presents. But I can't reject your kindness. I watched him hold the red tie against his throat. The color stood out sharply. It seemed to fit him perfectly. I continued walking until I reached a dry goods stall. An older married couple ran it. The wife, Linda Dalton, greeted me warmly. I took out the remaining 90 yuan and placed it beside a container of pumpkin seeds. I'd like 90 yuan worth of pumpkin seeds. Linda looked embarrassed. Ma'am, not many people buy these, so we don't keep much in stock. Someone purchased some earlier today. What we have left isn't worth 90 yuan. She looked at the money and made a suggestion. Why don't you wait here? I can ride home and bring more. We don't live far away. I'll be back in 10 minutes. I nodded. She told her husband to watch the stall, took the money, and rode away on her bicycle. David Dalton glanced at us, then put on his headphones and returned to scrolling on his phone. The silence made Super Hugh uncomfortable, so he asked me a question. Why are you buying so many pumpkin seeds? My daughter liked them. Your daughter, I finished the thought for him. She loved them when she was alive. Realizing he had asked the wrong question, Hugh gave an awkward smile and turned toward David instead. The older man recognized him. I know who you are. You ran that 100 yuan street challenge. I took part once. I bought a lot with the money. He looked at me with contempt. This old woman has no idea how to manage money. She spends everything on pumpkin seeds. He lifted his tea flask and took a long drink. The moment he lowered it, he suddenly looked straight at me. His eyes widened. The color drained from his face as if he had just seen something terrifying. He clutched his chest and fell beside the stall. Super Hugh froze. The viewers began commenting frantically. Streamer, his face has gone pale. It could be his heart. Find his emergency medicine. Hugh searched David's pockets and then looked around the stall. He found nothing. David struggled to speak. Linda, Super Hugh slapped his thigh. This is bad. His wife must have the medicine. David's phone was locked. A neighboring vendor called Linda, but she did not answer. She was probably still riding her bicycle. Hugh looked at the screen and tried to reassure the viewers. She said she would be back in 10 minutes. She should arrive any second. The neighboring vendor shook his head anxiously. She only said 10 minutes because she was afraid you wouldn't wait. The trip home and back takes almost an hour. Each minute felt longer than the last. People gathered around David, but no one knew what to do. An ambulance had been called, yet it had not arrived. I watched him lying on the ground and felt nothing but coldness. In this world, most people wanted to protect themselves first. Taking responsibility for a stranger could cost too much. David's movements gradually weakened. Then he became still. Linda and the ambulance arrived almost at the same moment. The paramedics examined him and shook their heads. Linda dropped to her knees beside her husband and began to cry. The doctor said his condition was stable. Why did this happen again? If I had known, I never would have left for that stock. The live stream exploded. 2 deaths in one broadcast. This can't be real. It's like a horror movie happening in real life. Everywhere that old woman goes, someone dies. The audience rose at a dizzying speed. Super Hugh's live stream reached #1 on the platform. But this time, he could no longer smile. He stared at me in fear. I picked up the bag of pumpkin seeds resting on Linda's bicycle and waved to him. The money is gone. It's time for me to leave. Goodbye. Good luck. I returned to my temporary room in the old Riverside building. A memorial portrait stood on an old wooden table. In the black and white photograph, A young woman smiled brightly. Two dimples showed at the corners of her mouth. I took a clean cloth and carefully wiped the frame. Then I placed a handful of pumpkin seeds in front of it. Mia, I brought you something you loved. I sat down, closed my eyes, and waited. I do not know how much time passed before police sirens sounded outside. Footsteps rushed along the corridor. Several officers entered the room. Clara Hale, we suspect that you may be connected to 2 deaths. We need you to cooperate with our investigation. I stood, smiled, and held out my hands. I spent the next 5 or 6 hours alone in an interview room. I understood the method. Extended waiting and an unfamiliar environment could weaken a suspect's emotional defenses. The fact that they were using such pressure meant the case had received serious attention. At last, the door opened. A tall, heavily built officer entered and sat across from me. My name is Captain Victor Hayes. He opened the file. Clara Hale, former professor of psychology at Westbridge University. 1 year ago, you resigned and began collecting recyclables around Riverside Market. I am curious. Why would someone who once stood before packed lecture halls willingly choose this life? I smiled. Everyone is pursuing something, Captain. Victor narrowed his eyes. That may be true, but if what you are pursuing violates the law, it becomes my concern. Today, 2 people died while you were buying things in the market. That is an extraordinary coincidence. I spread my hands. Life and death are beyond my control. Victor gave a cold laugh and threw a stack of photographs onto the table. Although you currently live in a deteriorating building, we found several interesting things in your old house. The photographs showed the bedroom. The walls were covered with images of Teresa Cole and David Dalton. They had been taken from different angles and recorded their daily habits, routes, and routines. A whiteboard stood in the middle of the room. It was filled with notes about their relationships, schedules, and behavior. Victor looked at me. You prepared these materials, didn't you? I nodded. They were part of a social research project. I wanted to study the daily lives of small market vendors. Is that illegal? For a moment, he had no answer. Then he gave a dismissive sound. We suspect that their deaths are connected to you. I smiled bitterly. One person was struck by something falling from above. The other suffered a sudden medical crisis. You think I killed them simply because I happened to be present. Both events could have been influenced by another person. Victor leaned back in his chair. We inspected the roof. We also sent David Dalton's tea flask for analysis. If you tell the truth now, your cooperation may be considered later. He closed his eyes as though he had decided to rest. I knew he was trying to increase the pressure, so I leaned back and relaxed too. A while later, the door opened again. A young officer entered carrying 2 reports. Victor immediately stood and took them. Clara, this is your last chance. When I remained calm, he placed the reports heavily on the table and began reading. The rustling pages were the only sound in the room. With every page, his expression darkened. The laboratory found nothing unusual in David's tea. The brick showed no clear evidence that anyone had interfered with it. Victor stared at me in disbelief. How is that possible? I smiled helplessly. If there is no problem, may I leave? I'll continue cooperating if you need me. His jaw tightened. You're eager to leave because one person is still alive, aren't you? I looked at him in surprise. That is a serious accusation, Captain. Without evidence, you shouldn't solve cases through imagination. Victor removed another photograph. It showed Super Hugh. A thick red mark had been drawn across his face. We found this in your home too. If I am right, he's the next target. I sighed and shifted into a more comfortable position. Prejudice is a mountain inside the human heart. This photograph proves only that I dislike him. It does not prove that I intend to hurt him. If he suddenly died, would you place that responsibility on me too? Victor was about to answer when the interview room door burst open. A young officer rushed inside, breathing hard. Captain Hayes, the streamer Super Hugh is dead. Victor shot to his feet. What happened? The young officer's face had gone pale. He ended his life during the live stream. Hundreds of thousands of people witnessed it. The red necktie was present at the scene. The video is spreading rapidly. The cybersecurity unit is trying to contain it. Victor dismissed the officer with a wave and turned back to me. Clara, Hugh Shaw's death is connected to you. I tilted my head. Do you usually investigate crimes by guessing? I have been sitting in this room. How could I control him from here? If you cannot produce evidence, it is time to release me. He stared at me for a long time. I will find the evidence. Then he turned and left. Not long afterward, another officer entered and removed my handcuffs. After leaving the Riverton Police Department, I returned to my room in the old building. I collected Mia's memorial portrait and carried it back to the house that had once been my home. The moment I stepped through the door, I felt like a stranger. When my daughter was alive, I had never noticed how large the living room was. Now that I was alone, the empty space seemed cold and endless. I went into the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. My hair had turned white and wild. My skin was darkened, and deep lines surrounded my eyes. Even the colleagues who had known me best might not have recognized the composed and gentle Professor Clara Hale, who once stood before a classroom. I did not feel sorrow when I saw my reflection. Instead, I began to laugh. I laughed until I no longer had the strength to stand. After a hot bath, I went to bed and slept deeply. I did not wake until noon the next day. My phone was on silent mode. More than 10 missed calls appeared on the screen, all from an unknown number. I was about to call back when the doorbell rang. Captain Victor Hayes stood outside. He wore plain clothes. His eyes were red, his face unshaven, and he carried a cup of coffee. The moment he entered, he dropped onto the sofa. I haven't slept since yesterday. I finally connected everything. I made him a cup of tea and motioned for him to continue. To understand this case, we first have to understand the relationship between you and the 3 people who died. After investigating, I realized the 4 of you were like 4 separate lines. There was only one point where those lines crossed. Your daughter, Mia Hale. At the sound of her name, the corner of my eye twitched. Victor continued. The 100 UN Street Challenge was originally Mia's idea. She created videos helping people in difficult circumstances and quickly gained a large audience. Teresa Cole, the fruit vendor, and David Dalton, the dry goods seller, both appeared in her challenge. Later, Mia was accused of staging her videos and misusing donated money. An online harassment campaign began almost overnight. Even after she deleted her account, the attacks continued. Eventually, she made a desperate decision and passed away. After that, Hugh Shaw began using the name Super Hugh and continued the 100 UN Street Challenge. In only 1 year, he went from an unknown streamer to a creator followed by millions. Victor lifted his tea. I spoke coldly. If you came here only to reopen my wounds, please leave. He shook his head. I understand your motive. You killed 3 people to avenge Mia. I started to object, but he raised a hand. Don't deny it yet. Let me finish. I nodded. The attacks on Mia became much more severe because Teresa and David appeared as witnesses. They recorded emotional videos and claimed that Mia never contacted them after filming. They also said they knew nothing about the donations and had never received any money. Yet both of them went from collecting discarded items to owning market stalls. Where did the money come from? Did Hugh pay them to accuse Mia so he could take over the attention surrounding her? Victor watched every small change in my expression. Then he smiled. It seems I'm right. We have the motive. Now we need the method. This morning, I sent officers to Riverside Market. They interviewed vendors and residents. For an entire year, you regularly entered the building behind Teresa's stall to collect recyclables. Residents often left bags of trash in the corridor. You removed bottles and cardboard, then placed the bags back exactly where they had been. No one paid attention to you. But were you really there only for the recyclables? You observed the building over a long period and gradually weakened the brick in a dangerous position. You knew there would be strong wind that day. You deliberately moved several stalks of sugarcane so Teresa would remain beneath that location. I said nothing. Victor lit a cigarette. David Dalton's medicine bothered me too. His wife said he used to carry it in his pocket. But during the past year, it repeatedly disappeared. So Linda began keeping it for him. Once she took responsibility for it, the medicine stopped going missing. I believe you removed it several times to force the couple to develop a new habit. I laughed coldly. Even if I had taken the medicine, I couldn't control when David suffered an attack. Victor tapped the dash away. I saw photographs of Mia. She looked very much like you. I also reviewed the live stream. Right before David collapsed, you brushed the hair away from your face and tied it in the style Mia often wore. David knew he had helped destroy her. When a ragged old woman suddenly began to resemble the dead young woman he betrayed, the shock may have triggered his condition. I asked, and Hugh. He died in front of hundreds of thousands of viewers. Did I do that too? Victor moved one finger from side to side. Hugh made the final decision himself. What interests me is why. He had a 4-year-old son. Because of the family's circumstances, the boy may have been the only child he could ever have. If you threatened the child's safety, everything would make sense. I leaned back against the sofa. That is still only a theory. Victor took out a phone. Deleted conversations can sometimes be recovered. Before his death, Hugh removed the contact from his messaging account. That contact had called him. We traced the account to another phone number registered to you. How do you explain that? My fingers tightened slightly around the edge of my clothing. Victor noticed immediately. A confident smile appeared on his face. My guess is that during the call you revealed your identity. Then you told Hugh that Teresa and David had not died by accident. You warned him that if he refused to obey, his son would be in danger. Hugh had just witnessed 2 deaths. He was terrified and unwilling to gamble with his child's life. So he followed your instructions during the live stream, and the red necktie you gave him became part of the scene. Am I right, Clara? I regained my composure. You have an impressive imagination. You should write novels. But to convict me, you still need evidence. Victor's expression hardened. You have been lucky. Every part of an almost impossible plan somehow succeeded. But luck does not last forever. He played a video on his phone. The footage had been recorded on the roof shortly before dawn. The light was dim. A figure wearing gloves stood beside the edge examining the brick. That figure was me. Victor took out a pair of handcuffs. You studied the building and believed there were no cameras on the roof. But several days earlier, a resident's laundry repeatedly disappeared. He installed a hidden camera to catch the thief. He did not record the person stealing clothes. He recorded you. Victor stepped closer. Clara Hale, you need to come with me. I leaned back against the sofa and slowly closed my eyes. In the interview room, I confessed to the motive and the preparation. My statement matched Victor's theory almost perfectly. After the officer recording the confession left, Victor sat across from me. I have a daughter too. I can understand part of what you felt, but the law cannot ignore the consequences. Based on this confession, you may face a very severe sentence. I smiled peacefully. Captain Hayes, the people of this city are fortunate to have such a devoted officer. My husband died young. Mia became my entire reason for living. After she passed away, there were many days when I no longer wanted to continue. Only anger kept me moving. Now it is over. There is nothing left for me here. Victor looked at me with regret before leaving the room. I remained in detention for 5 days. During that time, Victor visited once. He said the case had attracted too much attention and would be processed as quickly as possible. My court hearing was scheduled for the following day. When he saw how calm I was, he could only shake his head. That evening, rapid footsteps echoed through the corridor. Victor rushed to my detention cell. His face showed both shock and suspicion. Clara, you didn't carry out those deaths alone, did you? I looked up. Captain, my trial begins tomorrow. Why are you changing your theory now? His eyes were firm. For days, I have felt that I missed something important. I have been a police officer for 10 years. I trust that instinct. So I returned to your house and found this. He removed a photograph. In it, Mia was holding my left arm and raising 2 fingers in a victory sign. A young man stood on my right, smiling toward the camera. This photograph was hidden inside a psychology book beside your bed. Who is the man? I frowned. My daughter's former boyfriend, Derek Hughes. I forgot to throw the picture away. Victor put the photograph aside. Judging from your voice, you hated him. I answered coldly. When Mia was attacked online, he abandoned her immediately. He did not even attend her funeral. He had no conscience. Victor nodded thoughtfully. Can you describe the crime again from the beginning? The sudden change of subject surprised me, but when he insisted, I repeated the story. Victor leaned against the wall and tapped one finger rhythmically. You cannot see the whole mountain while standing inside it. After finding new information, I reviewed your confession. There are too many things that do not make sense. He raised one finger. First, the falling brick was too unpredictable. The wind was strong that day. You could not guarantee that the brick would fall at the exact moment Teresa stood beneath it. Second, the explanation for David's collapse is weak. You resemble Mia, but the difference in age is obvious. Changing your hairstyle would not be enough to make him believe the dead had returned. Third, one threatening phone call might not have driven Hugh to such a desperate act. He had money and influence. He could have taken his family away or contacted the police. I said, you don't have to circle around the point. Say what you mean. Victor continued. If a third person was involved, every inconsistency can be explained. The brick did not need to fall on its own. Someone could have been hiding on the roof, waiting for a signal before pushing it. David appeared to be looking at you, but he may have seen someone standing behind you. Derek Hughes was a skilled makeup artist. He could have transformed a woman with similar features into someone who resembled Mia. She would only have needed to appear at the right distance. I reviewed the security footage near the stall. A woman who strongly resembled Mia did pass through the area. Victor watched my face. Then there is you. To force him toward an extreme decision, someone had to make him hear his son's voice during the call. He had to believe the child was already in your control. That was why he did not contact the police. Am I right? I smiled. You really are talented. I approached Hugh's son and made the child cry during the call. I did everything myself. I may dislike Derek, but I will not allow him to take responsibility for my actions. Victor suddenly raised his voice. How long are you going to protect him? I checked the timeline. When Hugh received the call, his wife and son were at Northgate Amusement Park. You were in South Bank, near the old Riverside building. You could not have reached the child. Someone else was operating in the shadows. That person was Derek Hughes. I smiled through clenched teeth. Then arrest him. I have no affection for Derek. Victor looked at me coldly. You don't need to provoke me. I already have evidence. He played another video. A man wearing a cap appeared on the amusement park footage. It was Derek. He was present at the exact location where Hugh's son was playing. That day, Hugh's wife lost her phone. The boy said that while his mother was in the restroom, a man in a cap approached him. The man told him to speak to his father on the phone. He caused the child to cry, then walked away with the device. The boy identified Derek in a photograph. Clara, what do you have to say? I looked at him with apparent despair. Why must you investigate every last detail? Someone has already confessed. Isn't that enough? Victor looked at me with pity. I do not need someone who is merely willing to confess. I need the truth. Otherwise, I am not worthy of the uniform. Where is Derek? I lowered my head and remained silent. Victor shook his head. You don't have to tell me. I already know. Residents around the old building said they had not noticed any strangers entering. That means Derek was not a stranger to them. He had been living there. After your arrest, he believed he was safe and saw no reason to leave. Before coming here, I sent plainclothes officers to arrest him. At that moment, footsteps sounded outside. An officer ran toward the cell. Captain Hayes. During the arrest, Derek tried to escape from a 6th-floor window. The equipment he relied on failed. He fell and died at the scene. Victor froze. Then he rushed away. My trial was postponed the next morning. Several days later, Victor returned. He looked exhausted. The shadows beneath his eyes had deepened. After Derek's death, his phone was found near the scene. It had been badly damaged, but the technical unit recovered a large amount of data. Among the files was a year of messages between Derek and me. The messages suggested that Derek had always loved Mia deeply. After her death, he wanted revenge. According to what the police recovered, Derek had designed the entire operation. I had resigned from Westbridge University, adopted the identity of an old scrap collector, and become the public face of his plan. Mia had once dreamed of using her influence to help more people. Therefore, the 3 people believed responsible for destroying her were meant to die before hundreds of thousands of viewers. I, an older woman who supposedly no longer feared death, would accept full responsibility. The plan had almost succeeded, but from one photograph, Victor had followed the trail to Derek. When he finished explaining, he placed a hand on my shoulder. You were only an assistant. Your sentence may not be as severe as we first believed. 1 month later, the trial took place. I received a 3-year sentence for my role as an accomplice. Public attention gradually moved elsewhere. Because of my age and good behavior, my sentence was reduced several times. About 1 year later, I was released. Not long afterward came the annual day for honoring the dead. I went to Hillside Cemetery to visit my daughter. On the path leading up the mountain, I met Victor coming down. His expression was complicated. Have you made plans for the rest of your life? I recognized the concern in his eyes. Don't you worry, Captain. I will not do anything foolish on this mountain. There are still many days ahead of me. I have to live the part of life my daughter never had the chance to experience. Victor nodded, but his gaze kept drifting toward the offering basket in my hand, as though he wanted to make certain it contained nothing dangerous. We spoke for another moment and then said goodbye. I had taken only a few steps when his voice called from behind me. Clara, it looks as though you brought only one set of offerings. Aren't you going to visit Derek's grave? I did not turn around. My memory has become worse since prison. If you hadn't reminded me, I truly would have forgotten Derek. It's all right. I'll bring something for him next time. Victor's voice immediately changed. Clara, stop. Stop. I still have one question. I turned and gave him a calm, practiced smile. It is all over now, isn't it? Captain Hayes, please let me continue up the mountain. People have to look forward. They cannot spend their entire lives staring behind them. Then I continued toward the summit. When I reached the top, I looked back. Victor was still standing in the same place. He had not moved. My name is Clara Hale. I was once a professor of psychology at Westbridge University. Every lecture hall I taught in was filled beyond capacity. Some students had to stand outside the doors just to listen. I often began my lectures with the same sentence. The subconscious shapes your life and you call it fate. I believed that suggestion from the outside world could enter the subconscious, alter perception, and guide a person toward choices they believed were their own. I never expected that I would one day use a lifetime of knowledge to construct a crime. Someone once said that if you want another person to believe something, you should never tell them directly. You should make them discover exactly what you want them to discover. That was how I guided Victor Hayes. I repeatedly claimed that I hated Derek Hughes. At the same time, I deliberately left his photograph inside the psychology book beside my bed. If I truly despised him, why would I preserve his image in a book I often read before sleeping? Victor would reach the conclusion himself. I did not hate Derek. On the contrary, our relationship must have been close. From that point, he would believe Derek was my accomplice and the real organizer behind the plan. But one photograph was not enough. I needed more suggestions. The second suggestion involved Derek's profession. I hired a woman with features somewhat similar to Mia S. I dressed her in similar clothes, styled her hair like my daughter S, and told her to walk through the area covered by the camera near David Dalton S. stall. Once Victor learned that Derek was a makeup artist, he would connect the woman to him. He would believe Derek had transformed her into a convincing imitation of Mia. He would believe David suffered an attack because he thought the dead woman had returned. But that was not what happened. A man like David, who had betrayed someone who helped him in exchange for money, was not likely to be destroyed by guilt. His real weakness was his wife. David deeply loved Linda. On the day she left the stall wearing blue, a fabricated news report appeared on his phone. It claimed that a woman named Linda, dressed in blue, had been involved in an accident near the market. The name matched. The clothing matched. David believed the victim was his wife. When he looked up at me, he was not seeing Mia. He had just heard something that shattered him emotionally. That was why he kept calling Linda's name. It was not because she had his medicine. He wanted to know whether his wife was still alive. I led Victor down the wrong path in many ways. But one thing I told him was true. I hated Derek. I hated him more than you, Teresa, or David. Because the person who finally pushed Mia beyond what she could bear was Derek Hughes. While Mia was active online, she used the 100 UN street challenge and legally collected donations to help people living in hardship. She changed more than one life. Her audience trusted her. The accusations from Teresa and David alone would not have destroyed her. Mia was gathering evidence. She was exposing inconsistencies and slowly turning public opinion back in her favor. Then the person closest to her betrayed her. Derek accepted money from Hugh Shaw and secretly altered financial data connected to Mia's account. He made the accusation of donation theft appear undeniable. When the falsified records appeared online, people who once supported Mia believed they had been deceived. The harassment intensified immediately. Mia soon realized that Derek was the one who had betrayed her. The pressure from the public, combined with the betrayal of the man she loved, broke something inside her. Mia had always been an optimistic child. When she fell as a little girl, she would stand up and comfort me before I could comfort her. "Mom, I am fine. Don't worry." During college, she was injured in a traffic accident. When I reached the hospital, she was lying beneath several bandages. The moment she saw me crying, she reached up and wiped away my tears. "Mom, I'm strong. I am not going to leave you that easily." But in the end, she could no longer comfort me. Without Derek's betrayal, Mia might still have been alive. I wanted revenge, and Derek was the most important target. But my daughter and I had once made a promise. If one of us left first, the other would travel to the places we had never seen together. We made a list of destinations. Because of that promise, I could not die. I could not finish the revenge and then abandon the life my daughter had left behind. I needed to survive long enough to complete the journey for both of us. For 1 year, I prepared a plan that would make everyone responsible pay while allowing me to avoid the harshest possible sentence. I investigated Derek and learned why he betrayed Mia. He was consumed by gambling and debt. Even after Mia died, he continued placing bets. Before long, he lost all the money Hugh had paid him and borrowed even more. That was when Warren Cole approached him. Warren quickly became a man Derek trusted like a brother. When he learned Derek had nowhere stable to live, Warren allowed him to stay in an empty room behind Teresa's fruit stall. On the night of the final operation, Warren contacted Derek and said he knew someone willing to lend him enough money to settle his debts. He arranged a meeting at Northgate Amusement Park. While Derek went to the park, Warren carried out the remaining work. He took Hugh's wife's phone, approached their son, and used my secondary messaging account to place the call. Warren wore a cap that covered most of his face. The lower half of his features resembled Derek's just enough for a frightened child to confuse the two later. The boy's mistaken identification, combined with footage of Derek at the park, was enough to convince Victor that Derek had personally threatened the child. Before that night, Warren had also warned Derek that his creditors might discover where he was living. He told him to prepare an emergency escape route from the apartment. When plainclothes officers appeared, Derek panicked and chose the path Warren had already placed in his mind. The equipment he relied on had been made unsafe beforehand. Derek fell from the building and died. Afterward, a phone containing a false account and a fabricated message history was placed near the scene. When the police recovered the data, they found the complete story. Derek became the mastermind. I became an older woman he had manipulated into helping him. Who was Warren Cole? In one of Mia's old videos, the main subject was a young man in his 20s searching a trash bin for expired bread. After receiving 100 yuan, he bought a simple meal and spent the rest on a scratch card. The viewers attacked him immediately. They called him a hopeless gambler and said giving him money was a waste. Mia still exchanged contact information with him. She hoped she could help him climb out of the life he had fallen into. At first, he often lied to her and asked to borrow money. I told Mia to stop helping because he would probably gamble everything away. One night, he called her in tears. "I lied to you. I lost all the money gambling." Mia answered, "I know, but I was more afraid that one day you would truly need help and no one would believe you. I am glad you told me the truth. If you really want to stop gambling, I'll help you as much as I can." From that day forward, the young man never gambled again. His name was Warren Cole. He was the real person operating in my shadow. He was the Derek Hughes in the story I constructed for Victor Hayes. Other than me, Warren was the only person in the world who had genuinely cared for Mia. When I reached the top of the mountain, fresh flowers and memorial offerings had already been arranged beside my daughter's grave. The grass around the headstone had been cleared. Warren stepped out from behind it, took the basket from my hand, and gave me a gentle smile. When I go down the mountain, I am going to turn myself in. Then he bent forward and began coughing. Years of homelessness and deprivation had destroyed his health. The doctor says I don't have much time left. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to worry. Now everything is finished. I can finally be at peace. When he saw the concern on my face, he waved one hand. I used to run from creditors and live like a rat in the dark. Not until I met Mia did I understand what it felt like to stand in the sunlight. For the last part of my life, I want to walk forward honestly. Warren bowed deeply to me. Then he looked at me as grave for a long time before turning toward the path down the mountain. I stood still and watched him follow the winding trail. His figure became smaller with every step. At the foot of the mountain, he eventually met Captain Victor Hayes. I turned back to the headstone and placed the bag of pumpkin seeds beside it. Mia, I'm here. I still remember our promise. The mountain wind moved through the flowers. I raised my eyes toward the road ahead. The revenge was over, but the life my daughter had left for me to live was still very long.